Sometimes you hear this person say this: failure is not an option. Well, that's great in a movie. It gives us excitement and it gives us drama. But in real life, is that really true? No, it isn't. John Maxwell, he's a well-known leadership expert, said, nobody likes to fail. But if we're honest, we understand that failure is a part of life. There is no success without at least a certain amount of failure. He's right. We can't succeed without some failure. But if you want to not fail, then don't do anything at all. Okay? That's really what failure is when you don't try anything, when you stay in your comfort zone. So if you want to succeed, you are going to have to learn how to fail better, because you will fail. Seth Godin, he's a famous entrepreneur, said this. He said, he said, successful people fail often. But what sets them apart from everyone else is that they learn more from their failure than anybody else. So if you want to be good at anything, you need to learn. So you need to learn how to fail. Fellow Toastmasters and dear guests, please take this to heart. If you want to be successful in life, you're going to have to learn to fail better. And this is a process that goes on your whole life. Most of you are just starting out. I've been around a little bit longer. So I'm giving you the encouragement. Go for it now while you're young and take advantage of it. I want to start out looking at how to do failure by looking at a really good example of someone who failed well. Maybe you know him, Steve Jobs. Ever hear of him? He runs a little company called Apple. Okay? They're only worth $700 billion. They're the highest valued company in the entire world. In fact, they are worth more than double the second company. Isn't that amazing? They're in a league all their own. But you know what? In the early 90s, I used to work at a computer store. And I used to sell Apple computers. I loved them. But you know what? We were all nervous because Apple came very, very close to going bankrupt. So going from bankruptcy almost to being the biggest company in the whole world, who was responsible for that? Well, it was Mr. Steve Jobs. But you have to understand the beginning of the story before you get the appreciation of the end. He started at Apple when he was 21 years old. Then, when he was 30, in 1985, he was fired from Apple. Now, Steve was always a great visionary. But in the early years of Apple, he was not a good businessman. He wanted to do what he wanted to do, whether business would succeed or not. So they got rid of him. So what did he do? Did he take his marbles and go home and say, I'm not going to play anymore? No. He started another computer company called Next. And there, he made the effort to learn how to be a good businessman. And so, a few years later, several years later, Apple bought his company, $400 million. And Steve became the CEO again of Apple. And as they say, the rest of the story is history. So, but we have to appreciate what he went through in order to really just grasp what happened later in life with him. Now, for us, what's the first thing we need to do in order to fail better? We need to change our mindset about failure. We need to change it from thinking that failure is bad to seeing it as an opportunity to learn and grow. If we do that, it'll have a huge impact on us. We need to redefine failure that way, but then what we need to do is embrace failure. Not avoid it, not be afraid of it, but embrace it. How do we embrace it? There's 3 things I want to share with you on how to embrace failure. The first one is by far the most important. If you don't do the first one, the other 2 don't matter. And everything I read, all of the research I did looking at it, everybody said this first one is the most important. And guess what that was? Do you want to know? Are you sure? It's to take responsibility for your failure. It seems very simple, but it's a lot easier to say than it is to do it, correct? It's so much, we like to feel good about ourselves. So it's so much easier to want to blame others or make up excuses. Because, that's the way it was from the very beginning with Adam and Eve in the garden. When God came up to eat Adam, he said, Adam, why did you eat that fruit when I told you not to? It's not my fault, it's the woman. You gave her to me, it's your fault. And he looks at Eve, and Eve says, the serpent tricked me. It wasn't my fault. So from the very beginning, we've gotten very good at shifting the blame on other people or coming up with excuses. So it takes a little grit to take responsibility for your mistakes and your failures. After you take responsibility, the next thing you need to do is learn from it. Since you're not blaming anybody, you're looking for real answers. So you take a hard, honest look and try to understand why the failure happened, and then you look for solutions to change so that you can succeed. And then the third step, you need to take action. It's not enough just to know what to do. You need to do something. You'd have to make changes and move on. When I was preparing for this speech, I thought about something that happened to me my last year at university. I got a job working, being a supervisor of all the recreational facilities for the university students on the weekends. And my first weekend I worked, the guy who was the supervisor was there with me to kind of take me through the first weekend, show me the ropes. And I knew him, he was a friend of mine, his name was Jay. And so it went great the first weekend, but Sunday night, there was nobody in any of the facilities for almost 2.5 hours. We closed at 8. And so it was getting like 7:30. He says, well, let's get ready to close. I said, are you sure we shouldn't do that? We're supposed to close at 8. He goes, no, it's okay. So by 8:45, we were out the door. All the doors were locked. And I didn't think anything of it. Monday, I got a call from the secretary of my boss. Hey, William, Mr. Lambert wants you to come into his office. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that's about. And I get there and he looks at me and he goes, I got a complaint that someone went to the gym 10 minutes before it closed and it was already locked. And I was like, inside, I'm going, dang, I just got this job. I'm going to lose it. I'm going to get fired. So inside I'm saying things like this. It wasn't my fault. No, it was Jay, blame Jay. But then I realized before I spoke, I was in charge. So I looked at my boss and I said, I'm sorry, it was my fault. There was no one around, so I closed early. And he looked at me and he goes, okay, but don't do that again. And I walked out of his office, and to be honest, I felt like I'd grown a little bit. I felt like a man, I took responsibility. And so it really helped. And you know what I learned from that? You know what I learned? Is don't let yourself be pressured to do things that you know are wrong. Now, that's what I've learned from doing it. I want to close with a quote to share with you the things that Steve Jobs learned. But before I share the quote, let me just review really quick. Take responsibility for your failures. Learn from your failures, and then take action. Make changes and move on. I'm going to read it because it's a little bit long, and I would probably blow it if I tried to memorize it, okay? So, I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could ever happen to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. Less sure about everything. It freed me to enter into one of the most creative periods of my life. So I challenge you, Dream big. Don't step out of your comfort zone. Jump out of your comfort zone. And learn to keep learning how to fail. Keep learning and learning. Be like Steve. Fail better. Because if you do, you just might succeed beyond your wildest expectations. Mr. Toastmaster.